Are you ready to do some work?
Yes.
I've changed the title of the message just slightly from the indefinite article to the definite. The divine invitation. Let us pray. From everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. When we are no more, you are. When we are uncertain, you are there. Into this place you have called us tonight. Into your presence, we come with gratitude. And you have given me, oh God, an opportunity to serve your people in ways I would have never imagined. For the people called Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, and all who are touched by its promise. Take us into the depths of thy presence, O God, and feed us till we want no more. Yeah. This is our prayer this evening. This is my prayer every day. To allow me, O God, to know thy depths. For you are my God, and we are yours. Hear our prayer, O God. Amen. I want to share with you this evening a story that long predated my journey into theological education and that compels me still to reflect on what troubles our contemporary notions of human community and our indifference to the question of human dignity. Research has confirmed what we intuitively know, that the most formative experiences in our life usually take place when we are young, like quaint. And then in the years that succeed. It is hard for me to believe that a half century and more has passed since the occurrence of those constellation of events that would give substantive shape to the course of my life. It was lunchtime when the fight broke out. I was new to the school, in the 5th grade, when a pack of white boys descended on me with a torrent of fists and racial epithets. No adult rushed to my aid. To this day, I don't know how I got the best of that fight. I only know that I did. School suspensions followed. Theirs, not mine. Lena, the mother of me and Donna and Kevin, had always told me that I would have to answer to her if I did not vigorously defend myself when confronted. And so she was very pleased by the outcome. My father, not so much. The school that I attended and my siblings after me was a Norman Rockwell-type bedroom community for whites only. The de jure discriminatory practices of the South, like redlining here in good old Louisville, were rivaled by de facto restrictive covenants in the North and West. Restrictive covenants were 20th century contractual markers designed by white homeowners, real estate operators, bankers, and developers to keep black people and brown people and other diswanted peoples from moving into white communities. The segregation of the time somehow failed to prevent my parents' purchase of our home in white Americana. Even so, racism, America's original sin, reigned supreme. The neighborhood made it clear they did not want our kind. We did not belong. We were not welcome. Busing at our school was restricted to a tiny handful of black children. I was the only one who walked to school. The tendency of humans to separate and judge those not in our clan as lesser, deficient, subhuman, unrecognizable, taboo, alien, foreigner, stranger, an outsider, the enemy. They are not quite like us. These are designations based on race, gender, class, and a litany of disqualifiers with a long and sordid history. The 1950s and 60s represented the height of the 20th century black-led movement for freedom in the United States. The pivotal events of that era were part of an ongoing legacy of black freedom struggles, challenging and redefining the life of the nation. The courage of young people from elementary school to graduate school, the Little Rock Nine, the Wichita Seven, the Greensboro sit-ins, the Interstate Freedom Riders, James Meredith at the University of Mississippi, the school-age children in Birmingham met by water hoses and police dogs, John Lewis, Diane Nash, Ruby Doris Smith, Prithia Windhall, Ann Moody, James Bevel, James Lawson, and Bob Moses, just to name a few. They pressed their elders to assume a less gradualist stance and assume a more militant one. I grew up, as you've heard, in a place called St. Paul, Minnesota, far away from the creative centers of the black freedom movement. It didn't matter. By the time I was in high school, I found that with rare exception, with each successive year and experience, my anger as a young black man grew. Now, if you ever see my high school yearbook pictures, my brother and sister used to always ask me how come I never smiled in my pictures. I didn't have nothing to smile about. Our family attended a rather large Black Baptist church. The faithful were transplants from the deep South, like my mother and father, mostly blue-collar workers, and a fair number in the professions. As a congregation, we worship together under the venerable refrain, "There are no big I's or little U's in the church." My parents were well-respected leaders in our church, even though they didn't have the academic credentials to go with it. As with most Black churches, educational and vocational expectations for young women and men ran high, and communal integrity, social identity, and personal dignity were regularly invoked as articles of faith. Yes. I taught Sunday school from an early age. In my turbulent youth, the 22nd verse of the 139th Psalm became my mantra. I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. And in case you don't get the drift, I'm talking about white folk. In the late 60s and early 70s, young Black people raised their fists and voices defiantly in the name of Black power. Yes. The Black Panther Party for self-defense, the Black Liberation Army, the Republic of New Africa, the Black Women's Liberation Committee, the Black Women's United Front, the African People's Party, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, the February 1st movement, which I proudly joined, the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and countless other grassroots organizations were the bearers of fire. Yeah. Young Black women and men who carried about in their hearts, minds, and bodies the burning embers of justice and the relentless fires of liberation. Yeah. They challenged the myth of egalitarianism. They challenged the myth of egalitarianism, so deeply embedded in the American national psyche, and so blatantly contradicted by Black America's carceral reality. Contemptuous of their cultural despisers, these young people rejected all notions of second-class status and turned to the critical task of unmasking American meta-narratives of democratic freedoms and exceptionalism. In those racially charged years, going into a class with somebody named Edwin Sanders, reading Howard Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited in my first year of college, it turned my world upside down. It shook me. Suddenly, a cornucopia of imponderables about the evils of white supremacy, manifold systems of hierarchy and oppression, grotesque manifestations of empire and hegemony. I know you're saying, what kind of message is this? And my growing estrangement from the America that was. Were realigned. Thurman's slender volume, along with the galaxy of brilliant Black minds and hearts that I was being introduced to in and outside of the classroom, stunned me. This little book with its searching analysis and summoned me with a harrowing faith. My re-education, or if we put it in good Christian language, my repression of subjugated minds, to challenge the normative gaze, to disrupt the violence and voyeurism that plagues this land, to finally and at last bridge the unbreachable distance between human beings. Out of my grisly memories would emerge the phenomenal and ineffable sense of self, and a dawning recognition that human atrocities and injustice notwithstanding, the divine invitation to me was to goodness and generosity, joy and justice. It became for me a sacred truth. Whether you believe it or not, whether you want me or not, whether you accept me or not, we are made for each other. David Cassidy's painting of Whosoever, you've heard Ed say, has had a profound impact on me. It's been ubiquitous for the past weeks and months in this context. His work speaks to my soul. The original hanging in the Metropolitan Interdenominational Church in Nashville, where Ed is the senior servant, is one that I will always cherish. Be sure to look at it closely in your program, as well as up there. It is distinctive because it has no facial recognition. The features recede into shadows that tell no demographic tale. It reveals not the faintest clue about hair texture or length, fullness of lips or nose, eye tint or shade. The face is everyone and no one, and it is you and me. The body is draped in a brilliant rainbow garment of violet, orange, yellow, indigo, and green, set against a bold chromatic backdrop, perhaps a stained glass window or prism of refracted light. The figure on the forefront stands out prominently, larger than life itself, standing, watching, waiting, inviting, extending, cold. Nothing.
Yes, yes.
The arms are always outstretched. The nails are always in the hands. The heart is open wide. And writ large across that portrait, as you can see, is that one word, whosoever. The word comes from that most famous, or for some infamous, of texts in the Christian New Testament. We have memorized it even though we don't know what it means. For God so loved the world that God gave God's only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Now today, no critical biblical scholar worth her or his salt would recommend the King James Version. I understand that. But that doesn't change the fact that's what we recite. The passage is so deeply ingrained and so familiar to us that it's as if we are running on default. We're not sure what it means, But we don't need to be sure because we have recited it and kept it in our hearts. For some, John 3:16 is just a religious cliche. For some, it's Christian shorthand. For others, it's a cultural catchphrase that you use at sporting events. But for others, it is the critical distillation of the gospel. It is the Christian's inheritance. It is the believer's creed. I leave it to you to decide which you prefer. I have long asked myself what it is that I hope to accomplish as a student of religion and life, as a theological educator and leader, as a minister of the gospel, to plumb the depths of the divine, found in a single text, and more in a single word, may be all that I need. In the 3rd chapter of the 16th verse of the Gospel of John, there is found such a word for me. It is altogether subversive, dangerous, disturbing, sublime, and undistinguished in biblical scholarship. The word receives little attention in a text that is a favorite of traditionalists, but finds few postmodern takers. Yet if we have the courage to attend to the core of the heart of this well-known verse, here is found a word to fire the human imagination and lead us into the radical depths. Whosoever. Whoever. Everyone. Everybody. Whosoever. Jesus says to Nicodemus, says to us all. In African American churches for countless years, with cultural license, we have said it. Whosoever will, let him or her come. Without respect of person or denomination, our glad practice is to open the doors of the church on Sunday morning after the sermon to extend the divine invitation to whosoever as part of the hospitality of the communion of saints. Jesus says there is no test of eligibility, no grandfather clauses in the house of worship. There are no qualifications for fitness. I don't have to take an insurance exam to see about my pre-qualifying condition. For life in no way can disqualify me from the presence of the living God. Everyone has equal access to the divine source. No one lies beyond the pale. In the words of the old Negro spiritual, I've got a right, you got a right, we've all got a right to the tree of life. Dan Elshire, I hope you're enjoying my Presbyterian message. Dan Elshire famously likened graduate theological institutions to the solid, state-of-the-art rotary phone. We thought that we were built to last forever. And if we are not careful, we will find that we have outlived our usefulness. Some of you will remember Ma Bell, the telephone conglomerate that kept us connected to family and friends, businesses and organizations. Today, single circuit wires and telephone poles are gone or largely given way to fiber optic cable and wireless technology. Digital connectivity, internet, broadband streaming only blurs the lines further. In theological education too, our once sturdy networks of tribe tradition and thought are faltering and giving way. Like information technologies, theological education has seen an increase in the scale and complexities of our human inability to understand one another. The means of communication at our disposal are spectacular. And even here at Louisville Seminary, we're working hard to upgrade our IT. We're still kind of in 1999, but soon we're going to cross over. The means of our ability to connect have exponentially increased. But our willingness to want to connect has not. We don't always want to know and genuinely be known. We don't want to do the hard work of finding our way to each other. And yet, in a time of certain change, the magnificent invitation of whosoever awaits. I invite you to strategically envision with me a learning and living community where people are at home in their own lives. No pretense is required in their self-presentation. Come just as you are. And the sound of the genuine is a kindred experience to be shared without and within. Envisage a place that is filled with uncommon purpose and where thoughts, hearts, and lives seek to be whole, just, and of one piece. A theological institution that wrestles with inconvenient truths, wages peace, and practices anti-racism with unprecedented courage as the beginning of wisdom. A seminary community that invites and advocates, includes people of every background and description, every age, race, class, wealth, ability, ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity, and or expression, every religious tradition, and none at all. An institution that embraces people from every zip code, neighborhood, region, nation, and continent. A graduate theological school that cultivates belonging on campus and extends belonging into the community around it. Going into disregarded places where once it deigned not go before. A learning network responsive to the sacred call to care for the earth, the biosphere, and eco-justice issues. Envision with me further a theological setting that dares innovate its education, incorporates diverse learning platforms, and does not have any sense that this is bad. It takes those who live on campus and engages them with those who are off-site and embraces those who are online and figures out that every student can't take exams. You know when the last time I gave an exam in class? When I taught undergrad. The only time I've given an exam since then is for PhD students when they are going to cross the River Jordan. stewardship of human and fiscal resources. An organization that patterns shared governance, centered in bonds of trust for institutional vitality. A culture that is student-centered and student-focused, student-concerned, an institution that models in its hiring and personnel practices the very mission it espouses. A school that fosters a culture of generosity, generously giving and graciously receiving. A philanthropic environment where every individual is encouraged, affirmed, and embraced. A freestanding seminary, can you see it? That is proud to tell its story. One bordering the North and the South. Born of the distinctive Presbyterian and Reformed tradition. Reformed and always being reformed. Giving honor where honor is due. Building on covenantal relationships. And reforming the content of its education for the common good in the 21st century. A community of the faithful that recognizes the call of whosoever is never easy to follow. But it does it anyway. The choices we make today will dictate the quality of life that our grandsons and granddaughters and children's children can inhabit. It will decide the long-term health of this planet Earth. Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. You have a proud history of building bridges and engaging disparate and disconsolate worlds. By legacy, we are many lamps, one light, a beacon, a signpost on the way to the one who calls us beloved. A sign on the way to the one who calls us into community. Ours is an imperfect institution filled with imperfect people, beginning with an imperfect president. We are faith and thought leaders, seeking understanding, affirming John Coltrane's love supreme. Yes, sir. Jesus says, whosoever is welcome here. We are all of us one. That means you are accepted. I am accepted. We are accepted. All are accepted. All women. Yes. And all men. Yes. All generations. Yes. And all genders. Yes. All ethnicities. Yes. And all nations. All creeds. And all colors. All conditions. And all communities. All of God's children. And all of God's universe. Accepted for all time. Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. I would not have come here if I did not believe it were so. This is a place that celebrates whosoever. And we may not get it right all the time, but as God is my witness, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, you are God's place.
Yes.
And by the grace of God, we may not, as Martin would say, we may not get there to see it. But we provide the building blocks for what is to come. And I don't know about you, but I am absolutely excited. I don't believe in aspiration. I believe in realization. And if we are who we say we are, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is